My name is Bente, and I'm just another Norwegian hiker. I will now take you with me on our fantastic journey across Hardangervidda. 10 days, 107 kilometers to hike, 8 huts to visit, 9 days in a tent, and a total climb of almost 2,000 altimeters. An enormous and exciting challenge. Hardangervidda is Europe's largest mountain plateau of its kind, situated in the middle of the southern part of Norway. Most of the area is more than 1,000 meters above sea level, and it has a year-round alpine climate. My husband Robert and I had already been there once when we hiked from Litlos to Finse last summer. We truly fell in love with this area. So this year we wanted to give ourselves an even bigger challenge with a longer hike across a different part of the plateau. We chose a route from Halne, southwest to Litlos, and then northwest to Kinsarvik. We started by getting on a train from Bergen to Østhuset, then took a bus to Halne Mountain Lodge. This day we only hiked for about an hour from the trailhead before we set up camp at Lake Hardangervidda. It was quite windy and a little cold in the evening, so we quickly retired to our tent and our cozy sleeping bags. Day 2 was our first proper day of hiking, with 13 kilometers to Stigstup. I soon discovered that my body needed to readjust to carry a heavy backpack, so the pace was not the fastest. We carried almost all the food we would need for this entire trip, so we started out with backpacks of approximately 14 and 19 kilos. We looked forward to eating them lighter. The path was nice and mostly flat, so this was a perfect place to start our long journey. We were mostly lucky with the weather, but some rain clouds were impossible to avoid. Once we arrived at Stigstup, it felt incredibly good to have finished this first day of hiking, because it's always the hardest one on the body. We celebrated with coffee and chocolate before we set up camp on top of a sand dune. Wind is a near constant thing on Hardangervidda, so we really got to stress test our new tent by putting it so exposed in quite heavy wind. But there did not seem to be many other good spots to choose from. Our third day took us 11 kilometers by Tronsbu down to Langavatnet. The weather got constantly better through the morning, and the air became hotter and hotter by the hour. On our way down to Tronsbu, we could suddenly see a massive parking lot with hundreds of cars. That felt kind of out of place in the middle of a mountain plateau. It's weird what kind of things you don't miss when you have been away from them for a time. Like parking lots. At Tronsbu, we ate our lunch outside the cabin, as it seemed to be closed and unstaffed. When we resumed our hike, the heat hit us full force, and it almost felt too hot to hike. We Norwegians are not used to having to deal with heat while we are out hiking. It's mostly the cold we're good at tackling, but we truly appreciated the sunny and beautiful weather. The landscape shifted gradually from rocky to sandy, and the path felt soft and smooth and really good to walk on. The terrain was so flat that we could often see for miles in all directions. The The Lake Langavatnet is situated about halfway to Sandhaug and is famous for being a good fishing spot. But when we arrived, we found the most perfect little beach and wanted to spend most of our time there. The air was boiling hot, so after pitching our tent, we immediately got in the water. It was truly a cold pleasure, and the lake was so shallow it was actually quite challenging to fully submerge, but it felt so good. Unfortunately, we also spent quite some time picking up other people's trash from this beautiful little beach. Don't leave your trash in the nature, people! On day 4, we had a mere 8 kilometers to the cabin at Sandhaug, owned by the Norwegian Trekking Association, DNT. The sun was still boiling, even though we started our day quite early. We actually got sunburned through our FPS 30 sunscreen, and we had nothing left of the FPS 50. As you can imagine, more and stronger sunscreen was the first thing we bought after reaching the cabin. This part of the route was clearly a popular one, and we met hikers of all ages, even a few lucky toddlers and child carriers. We arrived at Sandhaug only an hour past noon. The cabin itself was so cozy, the staff inviting and helpful, and the other hikers there were so nice. Lots of hikers wanted to say hi, and the atmosphere around the tables outside was really good. We ate our lunch before we treated ourselves to both coffee, ice cream and sodas before we found a campsite next to all the horses. After pitching our tent, we got to borrow one of the cabin's rowboats and brought the fishing rod out on the lake. The fish caught twice, but did not want to bite down properly so we could catch it. I could even see the fish through the water, but it was only toying with us. We took turns rowing the boat, but after several hours, Robert got the honor of rowing us to shore in quite strong headwinds. Day 5 marked the start of the less populated part of our hike. Up until now, we had met day hikers, families, and short-distance hikers. Now we were headed for the more dramatic parts of the mountain plateau, with more peaks and valleys, less people in cabins, no cell service, and longer distances. Hubert was struggling more and more with his knee, but we hoped it was something that would heal itself with time and rest. It was fully functional, and he was able to walk the distances. It just hurt. On our way to Besso, the trail was more wet and took us through swamps, but DNT had put out planks to walk on. They truly do a good job of maintaining the trails and making them accessible. The weather changed constantly throughout the day, and when we arrived at Besso, it was quite windy. At the cabin, we ordered lunch, and you cannot believe how amazing it was to eat a home-cooked meal with vegetables after living on trail food for almost 5 days. Then we were back on the trail again, and it took us up between higher mountains, over some passes, and up a lot of steep hills. Luckily, we had a strong tailwind to help us reach the lake Bismarvannet. The lake was situated in a quite dramatic and beautiful valley, and we had heard from several people that they had been catching a lot of fish there. Despite a fierce effort by Robert, the fish did not want to show itself at all, but the mosquitoes did. When the wind died down, they started to swarm us in incredible numbers, so we actually resorted to eating our dinner inside the comforts of our tent. The next day brought several showers of rain, but I was actually okay with that as the mosquito density got lower. This marked our 6th day of hiking, and we had a lot of hills and valleys to hike up and down all day, but the landscape was truly wild and dramatic and cool. We ate our lunch in the middle of a rain shower, as we had given up on predicting when they would show up or suddenly stop. A couple of hours before we reached Litlos, we were caught in the most intense rain I have ever experienced. It poured down harder and harder until we just had to stop and laugh as the rain soaked through even our good quality rain gear. When we were out of the valley a couple of minutes later, the sun suddenly shone like nothing had happened. At least we got to dry a little. There's something special about going on extended hikes like this. Through hard and long days, we have to help each other keep our spirits up. And it's not always easy if something hurts a lot or you're tired or hungry. Luckily, we managed to be a good support for each other and cheer each other up with super dry humor. Day 7 was our designated break day at Litlos, and the rest was truly needed for our legs. With no Wi-Fi available, we spent most of our time reading hiking guidebooks in the cabin's common room. The highlight of our day was a well-earned shower and a 3-course dinner. By day 8, we were hiking again, this time 17 kilometers to Trollhetta. The weather forecast predicted a thunderstorm sometime in the afternoon, so we started quite early in hopes of getting to camp before it set in. After a little while, we ran into 2 hiking buddies at approximately our age, and we ended up chatting with them for a while. During the next hours, we alternated which pair walked in front of the other. After passing each other several times, we instead ended up walking together as a group. One of them was a Norwegian and had a dog named Victor. The other was a Canadian out on his first long-distance hike. We discovered that we were actually hiking the exact same route. They were incredibly nice hiking companions. The path provided several snow crossings and some river crossings, and the terrain was barren, rocky, wild and magnificent. Several times throughout the day, we could both see and hear thunderstorms passing us to the east, never reaching us but heading south instead. We were incredibly lucky, walking most of the day in warm sunlight with only a couple of small rain showers. When we finally reached the ledge going around the famous and tall Hardangervidda, a bigger rain shower finally reached us. But from there we could see the cabin in the distance, and the sun came out again on our way down. We were both wet, hot and sweaty when we finally reached Trollhetta. Just as I was putting the last of our tent pegs in the ground, we heard a tremendous thunderclap that shook the ground. The thunderstorm and wind was brutal, but the lightning luckily kept away from our little valley. After the lightning and thunder had died down, we actually fell asleep in our tent and did not wake until just before midnight. We quietly made dinner and watched a magical sunset before we went back to sleep. Day 9 was our longest, with its 19 kilometers of hard terrain down to Stavali. All the sleep from the previous day had done wonders for our bodies, and the robot's knee was finally getting better. I had been eaten by mosquitoes and seemed to be allergic, so my ankles had swelled to twice their sizes. But the almost 13 hours of sleep had helped tremendously. We had heard from others that this part of our hike was incredibly hard and demanding, and with several snow crossings, but luckily found that almost all of the snow had melted from the path, and that it must be much more strenuous for people hiking in the opposite direction. Several places the path just stopped mid-air and continued several meters below, but we could at least sit on our butts and scoot down instead of climbing up. You learn a lot about yourself and each other when you walk in the wilderness in this way. I have experienced what my body can actually handle, how far I can still walk when I feel like lying down, how many kind and pleasant people you can get to know both on trail and at the cabins, and especially how much inner peace I can get from letting my thoughts rest, putting one foot in front of the other, carrying with me everything I need to survive, and being surrounded by wild and beautiful nature around the clock. Despite this section of the hike not being as terrible as we feared, this is a hike I would only recommend for experienced hikers. With its demanding path, several climbs both uphill and downhill, and a lot of steep slopes to cross. We were incredibly happy when we finally rounded the last mountain and only had an easy last stretch down to the cabin at Stavali. Hot and sticky with sweat, we decided to take a bath in a nearby lake. When we resumed hiking, our two friends from the previous day caught up to us, and we walked together for the last kilometers. At the cabin we were greeted by several familiar faces from the previous cabins, and we sat chatting in the sun for a long while. Day 10 had arrived, and we were ready for our last section of 12 kilometers and over 1,000 meters of altitude downhill. This would prove to be my least favorite part of our entire hike, just because that much downhill on hard and bare mountainsides was horrible for my knees. The nature was truly beautiful, the views dramatic, and the waterfalls amazing, but none of that helped when my knees were slowly being tortured. All day it felt a little strange that the trip was almost over. We were tired, yes, but I somehow didn't want it to end anyway. It's almost a bit addictive to set out on long mountain hikes. All that matters then is food, water, direction, distance, terrain, weather, sleep, and each other. Coming back to civilization again after 10 days with only the most basic things in life would be strange. Fortunately, the peace and joy of the trip last for a long time, so I will take the memories with me into everyday life. On our way down the last few slopes, it was so steep that I didn't dare film for fear of falling. But we met many of our friends from the cabins and made it down safely. At the parking lot, my parents picked us up. We were given a shower and had a delicious hotel dinner. Then we were suddenly ready for the bus back home to Bergen. What a wild and amazing adventure! Hardangervidda. We'll see you again next year.